Located in Quebec, Canada, there's a network of strategic reserves in place to protect one of the most valuable liquids on the planet. And just northeast of Montreal, there's a warehouse that holds tens of millions of dollars worth of what has come to be known as liquid gold. More than 20 times more valuable than oil by weight, this liquid is tightly controlled by a small group of suppliers that are responsible for producing almost 80% of the global supply of maple syrup.
You are watching this road.
Tonight, Michael Gavreau is on patrol. He's on site to conduct his annual inspection of one of the largest strategic reserves in the network owned and controlled by the FPAQ. Gavreau opens the warehouse door and walks inside. He takes careful inventory as he strolls past the thousands of barrels that fill the warehouse. One by one, he takes count of each and every drum. Every single one of these barrels is filled with 600 pounds of pure maple syrup. Towards the back, Gavreau notices some barrels stacked on top of each other that he needs to get a count on. So he begins climbing up on top of the barrels to get a better view. But as he steps from one barrel to the next, the drum beneath him quickly gives out as Gavreau falls to the ground. The barrel rolls just a few feet before running into another nearby drum. Gavreau walks over to the empty barrel and removes the lid. It's at this moment that Gavreau realizes something is terribly wrong. Nearly 3,000 drums of syrup are unaccounted for. The barrels are in place, but the syrup is gone. The drums are completely empty. But how could this happen? This facility is tightly controlled, regularly inspected, with restricted access. The only real explanation was that someone from inside the FPAQ had organized the maple syrup heist. $2,750 gallons of sap is required to fill each 55-gallon drum with maple syrup. The sap is collected during a short window of time from winter to spring through spigots that are tapped into the trunks of maple trees. Only 3 of 13 species of maple trees contain the right sugar content to produce high-quality maple syrup. The weather conditions have to be just right for the sap to be collected. Ideal conditions call for frequent dramatic changes in temperature, with nights reaching below freezing while the days are warmer. At night, while temperatures are cold, the sap rushes toward the roots of the tree. While in the daytime, when temperatures are warm, the sap rises back up the tree to fill the trunk with sap. This drastic change in temperatures creates ideal conditions for sap to be collected as it rushes up and down, back and forth inside the maple trees. This is called sugaring season, and the window is narrow, lasting only from late winter to early spring. Once the sap is collected, it then has to be processed in the sugar houses. Here, the sap is slowly boiled down. Its boiling point is higher than water, so it requires a lot of energy to do this. 50 gallons of sap will yield approximately 1 gallon of pure maple syrup as it simmers for days on end until all the water has evaporated and what's left is a sugary golden elixir. This process is both labor-intensive and seasonal. It takes time, energy, and resources to make maple syrup at scale. Not to mention, there is really only one place in the world where conditions are just right to make the highest quality maple syrup on the planet. Richard Vollier was the ringleader of the heist. And Raymond Vollier was Richard's father. He was a maple syrup farmer himself, and he offered his farm to serve as the headquarters for the maple syrup heist. Etienne was in charge of selling the syrup. Sebastian would move the syrup to its final destination as the syrup trucker. Avec was the inside man. His wife was a part owner in the FPAQ warehouse where the syrup was stored. This allowed them access to come and go whenever they determined the time was right. Together, they each played a critical role in pulling off the heist. Here's how they did it. The plan was as follows. Arrive to the FPAQ storage facility after hours. This warehouse isn't actively patrolled by a security guard, so as long as they have ongoing access, they just have to not be seen. But the warehouse holds 5,000 barrels of syrup. Moving this amount of syrup all at once is just not possible, so it has to be done in stages. But doing this raises the risk of being caught. Not only are they required to revisit the facility each time they pick up the barrels, but they now have to find a solution for the missing barrels they're taking with them. Because even though there isn't a security guard, there are active inspections to take inventory. So they decide their best option is to return the barrels they take from the warehouse back to the facility right away. To do this, they'll need off-site storage. So each time they pick up a new haul, they truck it from the FPAQ warehouse to Raymond's sugar house. Here, they siphon off the syrup from the drums into the syrup containers and refill the barrels with water. As soon as they're refilled, they then truck them back to the facility, move them back inside, and return them to the same spot they picked them from. While this is happening, Etienne is developing a network of buyers to offload the syrup. But they have to be careful not to move it all at once. This would raise more flags. So Sebastian trucks the syrup in small batches out of Canada and into the US. The remaining barrels remain at the Maple Syrup Heist HQ on Raymond's farm. They repeat this same process over and over. Thousands of barrels of syrup over a period of months. But this is taking too much time and the risk of being caught grows greater with every run. So they meet and decide they need to move faster. In order to do this, they stop refilling the barrels with water. This speeds up the return process and allows them to pick up the pace of the heist. But it adds to the risk of being caught. They move through 3,000 barrels of syrup valued at $18 million before the inspector notices the barrels are empty. A result of their decision to stop refilling the returned barrels with water. But all great heist films begin first with a why. Danny Ocean was more interested in making a statement to Tess and seeking revenge against Terry Benedict than he was about the money itself.
Why do this? Why not do it?
Jackie Brown is searching for her youth in Kaiser Soze, is determined to convince the world that he doesn't really exist.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
The crimes themselves are just a means to an end, but the money itself is usually just a symbol of what they're really after. For Richard, he wanted to make a statement to the FPAQ. To understand what Richard was trying to say, it's important to understand what the FPAQ really is. The FPAQ is an acronym that translates from French to English as the Federation of Quebec Maple Syrup Producers. Originally, this group was formed in 1966 with the idea to protect the producers of maple syrup in this region. But over the years, the FPAQ has received criticism from farmers in Quebec and has been given a number of nicknames that illustrate how some feel about the FPAQ practices. Among these names are Maple Syrup Mafia and Maple Syrup Cartel. Many comparisons have been drawn between OPEC and the FPAQ, and there are a number of similarities. Both maintain a strategic reserve to control supply, monitor the marketing practices of each supplier, and control the prices of each commodity. For syrup farmers in Quebec, you're required to contribute a set amount of your final yield to the International Strategic Reserve, which is controlled by the FPAQ. This practice has transformed from what was originally intended to be a governing body that protected the farmers in Quebec to what many believe to be predatory practices. Richard Valliere, the son of a maple syrup farmer, decided he wanted to do something about it. He felt as though this system was preying on the good people of Quebec, and his intention was to cause damage to the FPAQ by taking back what he believed to be stolen property. But the end result was that all parties involved in the maple syrup heist were caught and prosecuted. Richard was sentenced to serve 8 years in prison in order to pay back $9 million to the FPAQ. In the end, the FPAQ remains the governing body for maple syrup. And the chances are that when you enjoy your next stack of delicious pancakes covered in true maple syrup, these were brought to you by what has come to be known by many of the farmers of Quebec as the Maple Syrup Mafia.